I want to share some reflections on healing racism in our world. So in the midst of a week where there's been another onslaught of tragedy against people of colour, there is so much hopelessness. The murder of George Floyd, this awful Amy Cooper situation. And this offering, these reflections are a vision for hope, my vision for hope. And this video is one take, no edit, so bear with me as these reflections emerge through me. So the first thread of reflection for me is that when these tragedies happen, there's this collective rush to address racial inequity in our society. So we see it on social media and we hear it in our communities. We need to solve racism now. This has gone on for long enough. We need to fix this. And the urge there is beautiful, justice, fairness. But the framing, I believe, is wrong. So when we talk about fixing racism, think about the other things that we fix. We fix a car or we fix a light bulb. It's almost as if we're looking at racism as something objective out here that we can figure out and understand, tinker with, remove some bits, add some bits, and then we can fix it. But of course, we know that that doesn't work. And the issue with seeing it as something that is fixable is that we see it as something outside of ourselves. We see it as something objective. We look at an Amy Cooper situation and we see, well, you're the enemy. You're a evil, racist, white person. If we can just get rid of all of the people like you, it will be fixed. But the deeper part of us knows that it's not the Amy Coopers of this world that are the problem, that they are the symptom of the conditions that allowed for a white woman to weaponize her race against a black man so easily. It's the conditions that are the problem. And when we start to think in terms of conditions and context rather than individual enemies, there's a shift that happens away from trying to fix something out there external to me to thinking about how we heal something that is internal to all of us. We bring it back in and look at what role am I playing in upholding a system that allows for this to happen? What am I doing? What am I not doing? We bring it in. And that's much harder than thinking that it's something that can be fixed. Our brains want to problem solve rather than stay in the uncertainty and the discomfort of knowing that maybe this is something in me that needs to be healed. And I feel the pushback against this is that the idea of fixing something feels quick and feels action oriented and feels like this is an emergency, a black man being killed in the streets by a policeman is an emergency. And so in an emergency, we look to control and extinguish and remove, when there's a fire, we control the fire, we put out the fire, and that's how we deal with emergency. But I think in situations as complex as racism, we are better to look at the idea of emergency not as something to be controlled, but as an emergence of something. It comes from the same word, the emergence of an opportunity to do things differently. And the opportunity here is to shift the focus from out there to in here. And the other thread of reflection that I'm on is that when we feel this emergency, we also feel like it's something that needs to be fixed by us. I need to go out there and fix this. Our government needs to fix this. And there's some truth in that. But there's also the invitation to think about healing racism intergenerationally. So the idea of solving what is a deep and complex psychological psychosis in one generation seems increasingly unlikely to me. And that isn't to say that we shouldn't be trying, but rather to say that if we start to think about healing racism as something that is done over generations, then we take a different approach to it now. We take an approach to it now that really serves the long-term healing of this evil. If we think that, well, the process doesn't stop with me, then the idea of doing 5 years of deep anti-racist in your work on yourself does not feel like a waste of time, does not feel too slow, because you know that you are a link in the great chain of what needs to happen. The Nigerian philosopher Bayo Akomolafe says, "These times are urgent, let us slow down." And I think that is no more true than in the case of racism. These times are urgent, let us slow down so that we can work at the depth that is needed, that is required, so that we can look inside at our role, at our psychology, at our behaviors and beliefs that are causing these conditions to continue recycling. And I reflected about how this idea of it needs to be me who solves it is, first of all, a very egoic led idea, but also it's actually a very Western framing of problems where life is so material. It is what is here now needs to fix this, the rational, the material. But when we look to the mythologies and the philosophies of the people who racism affects, I look to my own heritage, my family hailing from West Africa before they were transported on the slave ships to the Caribbean. Inbuilt into our DNA is this idea that we are just a link in the great chain of our ancestors, that our ancestors are here with us, that it didn't begin with us, that it won't end with us. And so there's a decolonization of actually even thinking about healing racism as something that is intergenerational, as something that isn't for us to fix, but rather for us to say, I know that I have a great responsibility and a great opportunity in the great healing of this. And that's all I can do. And I just so want to be clear that this isn't a saying that we should take our foot off the gas or move unnecessarily slowly or not respond with passion, but rather to say that when we shift our focus from out there to in here, when we see that it's not about us, but that we are just a cell in the organism of this great tapestry of healing, then we don't slow things down. We actually move forward. We move forward in a way where healing can really happen. So the offering of what can I do now? Well, my offering is slow down. If you are a white person, resist the urge to react, to try and fix, to try and save, and look inside and say, how do I heal? How do I heal from the psychosis of racism that continues to create the conditions? And if you're a person of color, to slow down, to know that it is not your individual responsibility to heal this burden, but that perhaps the best thing you can do is to heal the trauma within, to continue the work of your ancestors, to lay the path for our children. So those would be my reflections. I hope this is a vision for hope, to say that this doesn't begin with us, it doesn't end with us. We're just a link in the great chain.